Hey, you're listening to Indiana Underground Radio. My name is Andrew West, and this is our co-host Tyler Hearn. Later on in the show, we have an interview with Joe Henzler of the Constitution Party of Indiana. But first, Tyler is going to give us the current event.
This first current event is actually about Chinese banking and the takeover of American banks by Chinese banks. This is by Veronica Smith. The United States opened its banking market to China's biggest bank, ICBC, for the first time clearing a takeover of a U.S. bank by a Chinese state-controlled company. Just days after high-level U.S. economic talks in Beijing, the Federal Reserve approved an application from Industrial and Commercial Bank of China to buy a majority stake in the U.S. subsidiary of Bank of East Asia. Now, the transaction will make the ICBC the first Chinese state-controlled bank to acquire retail bank breaches in the United States. ICBC has been the most aggressive of Chinese Big Four banks in expanding abroad. Outside China, it operates subsidiary banks in Asian countries and has branches in a number of countries including Germany, Japan, and Singapore. According to the Fed, the bank has a total assets of roughly $2.5 trillion. The ICBC will buy up to 80% of the U.S. unit of the Hong Kong-based Bank of East Asia, which operates 13 branches in New York and California. As a part of the deal, ICBC and the two backed financial firms, China's Sovereign Wealth Fund, the Chinese Investment Corporation, also known as CIC, and Central Huijin Investment, hope I'm pronouncing that right, will be recognized as a bank holding companies regulated as commercial U.S. banks. The Fed said the takeover may not occur before May 15th or later, 3 months from Wednesday. The broad expansion of Chinese footprints in the U.S. market comes amid a series of financial reforms in China that could begin to open the lucrative market to U.S. firms. After May 3rd through 4th talks in Beijing, the U.S. Treasury noted that China had encouraging progress on a number of issues, including taking steps toward a more open and more market-oriented financial system. The Fed said today that the ICBC proposed acquisition, which is relatively small, would not have much of an impact on the banking market. The combined deposits of the relevant institutions in the metropolitan New York banking market represent less than 1% of the market's deposits. The central bank noted that ICBC already has a banking and financial services in the United States through its New York branch and its subsidiary broker-dealer. The competition includes Bank of China branches in the New York metropolitan area and CIC, which has non-controlling stake in Morgan Stanley. Isn't that ironic? ICBC will pay $140 million to buy an 80% interest in the Bank of East Asia, USA, China's state news agency, Xinhua, I believe, reported in January 2011 at the time the deal was signed. This unprecedented acquisition of a controlling stake in the U.S. commercial bank by Mainland Bank is strategically, can't pronounce today, Strategically, yes, thank you very much. Significant. Xinhua quoted ICBC Chairman Jiang Jinqing, I believe, as saying...
We'll just call him JJ.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good idea. That'll make it a lot easier. The Fed said its board also consulted with the board also consulted with the China Banking Regulatory Commission, the country's main banking regulator, and pointed to steady improvement in regulations since founding in 2003. For a number of years, authorities in China have continued to enhance the standards of consolidated supervision to which banks in China are subject, including through additional or refined statutory authority, regulations, and guidance, it said. In other Fed in other Fed board discussions, Bank of China, the third largest bank, won approval for a branch in Chicago. The Bank of China operates 2 insured federal branches in New York City and an uninsured branch in Los Angeles. Agricultural Bank of China, the fourth largest bank, was set to establish a branch in New York City where it already operates as a representative office.
What do you think about this?
I think it is just... This is what we've been worried. This is what everybody's been worried about. Whenever we saw those commercials when we saw those commercials for China, as far as them, owning us. America works for Chinese. This is exactly, this is the start of what they were worried about. Has anybody ever seen those commercials? I can't remember who it was for exactly. I believe it was for Republicans against Democrats,
Probably.
which is something that they would do. But like I said, this is exactly what we're worried about. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, they already hold a vast majority of our debt for the federal deficit, and now Americans are literally going to hand them their paycheck. So.
I don't understand how they can even pass this this is not constitutional at all. I don't understand how this is getting passed. I don't understand where there's the lack of uproar against it on a government level, and obviously I'm not too surprised that there's not a lot of people, average citizens like you and me. I understand that there may not be a huge uproar coming from those peers because obviously media doesn't want to cover this. They never want to cover true stories like this. They want to know what Snooki's doing. But you'd think there would be some form of media somewhere, people would be in a huge uproar about this, but it seems nothing more than they're just merely mentioning it as a cliff note.
Right, and one thing that struck me, even a lot of the keywords used in this, authority, regulation, guidance. Of course, the Federal Reserve. To me, this has not good written all over it. Once again, part of this country seems to be heading in the opposite direction.
Yeah, just the overall trend of the banking markets worldwide is just becoming very, very scary. There was actually today, which we're not covering. I'm just mentioning as a cliff note that there was actually a run on the banks in Greece today. The President Obama just recently admitted that there's fears of double dip recession, and we seem to be handing all of our money over to, or we're borrowing all this money from China. The Federal Reserve, every dollar that's printed has an interest on it, so we can never get ahead. There's no way it seems to climb out of this.
Yeah, the Federal Reserve, they're just making money out of thin air. I'm not an expert, but my impression of fractional banking, that if someone deposits $10, they're then allowed to finance $100. Now they don't have $90 of that to give, and for every it's a tenfold increment. For every magic number, it's not even real money. It gets multiplied by 10 in the money that they have. Isn't
that the definition of a Ponzi scheme?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, and then of course they just print paper money, and which just deflating the crap out of the dollar. It's people say the gas is going up, milk is going up, eggs are going up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it seems to me the true price isn't really going up. It's that the value of our dollar is going down and down and down because there's nothing backing it whatsoever.
If you ever want to see a trend as far as how the U.S. dollar is going, you need to pay attention to gas prices, for one, which that's very manipulated. But the big thing is always the food prices. That's where a lot of people, basically they'll take a fairly generic food source, apples, bananas, wheat, rice, whatever, anything like that, and they'll actually track it for month to month to see how the prices are rising, how the prices are falling. That is the indicator of how the deflation is either deflation or inflation, depending on how the trend is, which is, unfortunately for us, nothing but deflation.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is why we need something as far as precious metals. First of all, it's in the Constitution that it should be, that our currency should be based on precious metals, gold and silver. You give way too much power to people that already have too much power to begin with whenever they're allowed to just, I got all this money in my hand, here you go. All it ends up doing is, like he was saying, print money out of thin air. If there's more money out there, the price goes, the price of the dollar goes down. I even saw, who was the Federal Reserve Chairman before Ben Bernanke? Alan Greenspan.
Yes.
Alan Greenspan. I saw him on an interview in CNN one time, and they were asking him questions about our debt. This wasn't why he was in office. This was after, or why he wasn't the chairman. This is after. This is fairly recent. I believe it was the past year or two, whenever all the worries of the national debt, which are still there, but whenever they first started coming up. They're like, Mr. Greenspan, what do you think we need to do about this huge debt that we got looming over this country? He said, well, the debt itself is not a problem because we can just print more money to pay it off.
Right.
What?
And another problem I see with Keynesian economics is that, like you said, when you print money you don't have, then, the rich have more money than they should, and it lets people that wouldn't normally have money have money. And I think reaching over to the other side, your Green Party, your environmentalist, is another thing this is doing is allowing us to go through so much more raw materials and precious resources than we should be going through otherwise, because normally we wouldn't have the money to just throw it around.
Right. I want to pose a question real quick. During all the bailouts and all this time, they're printing off more money, putting more dollars out there, deflating our dollar. How many of you ended up with any of that money they printed out? I mean, honestly, only thing that I notice that happens is that I can buy less stuff whenever they print out more money. That's the only thing I notice. I don't understand how people think that that's going to end up helping the economy at all. But that's my take on it. I just, if somebody were to maybe explain it to me in a different way, but it seems fairly common sense to me.
Well, I think even more pressing than this is the this TSA thing. Would you like to take it away?
Yes. In an attempt to be fair, we're going to give you three sides of this story. Number one, according to the TennesseeNewsPress.com, the Tennessee Department of Safety and Homeland Security on Tuesday partnered with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security's Transportation Security Administration, the TSA, and several other federal and state agencies for a safety enforcement and awareness operation on Tennessee's interstates and 2 metropolitan area bus stations. They are randomly inspecting these vehicles on highways in Tennessee. The random inspections, I guess maybe put that in quotes, really aren't any more thorough than normal, according to Tennessee Highway Patrol Colonel Tracy Trott, who says paying attention to details can make a difference. Quote, people generally associate the TSA with airport security, but now we have moved on to other forms of transportation such as highways, buses, and railways, said Kevin McCarthy, TSA Federal Security Director